Alabama's depth ain't what it used to be. And what I mostly mean by that is that Missouri's is now comparable.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And on today's program, of course, got all kinds of stuff to get to on this Missouri-Alabama football game, including some early week injury updates for the Tigers. Also, I want to remind you quickly, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket purchase. And I'll just say this, Alabama's depth is definitely not what it used to be. And I'll explain what I mean here in just a little bit, why I'm saying this from the Vanderbilt game. But it's not as though Alabama's first string is not still chock full of star players here in college football, a bunch of guys who have NFL careers, without a doubt. So my stars and scrubs, well, just like in fantasy football, that's really fantasy sports language there when you say stars and scrubs as far as a strategy. It's not meant to be taken literally. I'm not saying that anyone who's not a star that I list here for Alabama should be considered a scrub. The point here is that, well, strategically, spend more of your money on the star players and let the rest of your roster come to you. The big point here is that in the transfer portal era, in the NIL era, I think the days of teams like Alabama and Georgia and LSU basically just stockpiling five-star, possibly even NFL type of talent on their second and third strings, I just think those days are mostly over. Again, there's obviously going to be exceptions to that. There's certainly going to be guys who are true freshmen on Alabama's roster who may not play much on Saturday, who eventually will end up in the NFL. But really what I'm getting at here is actually, let's just take a step back. Let's go back to this past Saturday when Alabama was tied at halftime against Vanderbilt. Also, this was a one-possession game heading into the fourth quarter. And yet, really, Vanderbilt didn't do all that much offensively after the first couple of drives. And, well, the couple of times that they did, Diego Pavia, that is, of course, the Vanderbilt quarterback, had a couple of red zone turnovers, including, I just thought, a really, really bad interception on first down when, quite simply, the Commodores just didn't need that. They didn't need to be in desperation mode whatsoever. And it just felt like by the end of the game, though, by the time the fourth quarter did come around, it just felt like Alabama was able to impose its will a little bit in a game that, well, looked a lot more even in the first three quarters than you would have probably imagined. And even though, by the way, even though Alabama settled, I will say, when they were up 6 points, they end up with a long, impressive 15-play drive that ended up settling for a field goal, but I will say this, with 4 minutes left in the game, they did effectively end the ball game. And really, you look at the stats, Alabama was the better side. They deserved to win that football game. But my point is, I just don't think you're going to see that fourth quarter depth advantage that I think hit Vanderbilt. I don't think that's going to happen to Missouri, not only because, well, I just don't think, like I said, in this new era, I don't think the upper echelon teams are going to be able to stack talent like they used to be able to because of the portal, because of NIL. Well, quite simply, I think Missouri has had the opposite effect, whereas their depth has improved, whereas the portal has helped, I think, teams like Missouri, teams that have money to spend, but maybe aren't your traditional powers. I think Texas Tech is another great example of that. So again, I think it is a stars and scrubs type of operation. Again, the scrubs thing that's hyperbole and language left over from fantasy football is what that really is. But the stars part of Alabama's roster, well, that really isn't an exaggeration or any hyperbole whatsoever, because I'll be honest, going into this season, I thought Ty Simpson was going to be a serviceable quarterback for Alabama. So far, he's been much more than that, to the point where you're seeing Alabama fans online start to say, hey, why not Ty? Why not him as the Heisman Trophy frontrunner at this point? Why can't he win the award? Well, quite simply, Simpson has played well enough, even in the Florida State game, where Eli Drinkwitz recently said this morning, hey, Alabama's basically a different team since that game in Tallahassee. Well, even then, Ty Simpson was pretty impressive. Of all the myriad problems that I think Alabama had in week one, Ty Simpson was certainly not one of them. And, well, certainly their big bounce back since that opening week, a win at Georgia. They got revenge against Vanderbilt, of course. Ty Simpson has been a beast, quite simply. He's been excellent. He's been moving around the pocket, buying time, and, well, as Eli Drinkwitz said, he's definitely figured out how to beat cover too. In other words, I think Simpson has done a really good job of hitting Ryan Williams and his other receivers down the seam. And I do think Jam Miller, by the way, who may not be the biggest NFL prospect in Alabama recent running back history, I think he's definitely a difference maker, though, at this level. And he was really good against Vanderbilt. He makes a big difference. He did not play in that first week against Tallahassee, and certainly he makes the Alabama running game a lot more potent. Also, Justin Jefferson, by the way. No, not that Justin Jefferson. Speaking of fantasy football, if you're an NFL fan, you're very aware of Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson. But no, the Alabama linebacker, if it weren't for Josiah Trotter, I would say Justin Jefferson is pretty clearly the best run stuffing and middle off-ball linebacker, let's put it that way. The best linebacker I've seen in the SEC so far, it's got to be Trotter or Justin Jefferson. And not that I've seen all of the linebackers in the SEC, but I have happened to have seen Alabama a lot so far this season. By the way, I haven't even brought up Ryan Williams yet. Yes, he's 18 years old now. Our joke last year was how often it got brought up that Ryan Williams was just 17 years old. But you know what? It has been somewhat of a sophomore slump here for Williams, just in terms of dropping the football. So I'll tell you, if I'm Alabama, I'm looking to get him the ball in his hands early in that ball game, just on a screen pass, something early, just to get his confidence up a little bit. Because when he's right, he's still one of the absolute most electric players in the entire country, and obviously a huge NFL prospect. In fact, really, Williams, his ceiling is still way, way, way up here off the screen, quite honestly. What's happened this season is Williams, well, the floor is just a little bit lower. If he can get the dropsies going in Columbia, that could end up being a huge deal for that. I'll just say long term, it's one of those things. I'm not terribly worried about it if I'm a Ryan Williams supporter, agent, Alabama fan, whatever it might be. But over the short term, on the road, hostile environment, 11 a.m., maybe a little sleepwalking for the 18-year-old. You never know, just something to watch on to there. But you know what? I have even more Alabama players to talk about, even some more star players, in my opinion, at this level at the very least. And plus, Eli Drinkwitz has some updates on Cayden Green, Jordon Harris, and Dre Norwood as well. So let's get there in just a minute. But first, though, we got to talk about PrizePicks. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions in life, and on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you literally paid all of the time. Playing PrizePicks is so much fun, and you can pick more or less on player predictions. It's really that simple. Like, for example, Josh Allen's passing yards, Saquon Barkley's rushing yards, that kind of thing. Hey, you think Saquon's off to a little slow start? Maybe you go less than. Well, that's what I love about PrizePicks. You can make it as big as you want, of course. Stacks. So if you want to ride with a player, you can select, by the way, if you want to stack them, you can then select their passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, all in one lineup. So download the PrizePick apps today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. It is PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. By the way, the line head is steady, at least since yesterday. 3.5. Missouri is an underdog, plus 126 if you want the Tigers to win outright. So a slight underdog here, but my idea that really this game is closer to a coin toss than maybe a lot of people want to admit. Seems like my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook agree with me at the very least. And by the way, a lot of people have been wondering if Missouri offensive tackle and, well, I guess guard as well. He's played a lot more at guard for Missouri than tackle. But our starting left tackle, Cayden Green, unclear still if he's going to play on Saturday or not. Drinkwitz says Green got some rehab reps at practice on Monday and will be listed as questionable this week. Quote, follow along closely to the SEC availability reports and Pete Thamel tweets. Oh, Eli, you rascal, you. Are you not just the best? But seriously, you got to love him making reference there to those Pete Thamel tweets. I wonder if Drinkwitz could possibly be his source there. Nah, no way. That couldn't possibly be true. But regardless here, I think, in all seriousness, I do think Eli Drinkwitz being a little bit playful there, if I have to guess, if I have to make an educated guess here, does make me a little bit more optimistic about Cayden Green. And, you know, Drinkwitz has been pretty open and honest for the most part about injury reports. And if he really doesn't know, then he'll tell you if he doesn't know. And I don't know. That's almost a wink and a nod. I think certainly Cayden Green is absolutely questionable. He's going to need a few more days of practice. So we shall see. I'm just taking that tone. Again, this is total speculation on my part. I'm taking that tone at least to be a slightly optimistic one. Don't read too much into it, but maybe just a tiny bit. And also Missouri cornerback Dre Norwood and Missouri tight end Jordon Harris are a full go, according to Drinkwitz. So that's really important news, almost every bit as important as Cayden Green in some ways. Certainly Dre Norwood, one of Missouri's best defensive backs. The Tigers have had some struggles there and some miscommunications that have led to some huge plays. But those have been more on the safeties and not so much on, I would say, on Norwood in particular. So he's an important player. Very good news that he's a full go for Missouri. And I would say the same thing for Jordon Harris, too. He's maybe one of the most underrated pieces on the Missouri roster. He is the type of blocking first tight end who you can still throw a pass to, by the way, in a pinch. Especially just, hey, throw it to him out in the flat when the defense forgets about him. He can catch it and rumble for 10, 15 yards and a first down without too much difficulty. But clearly Harris at times is like a glorified sixth offensive lineman. But that is a very important player to have on your team and the type of guy that, well, NFL teams actually covet quite a bit. And he could really be an underrated NFL prospect on this roster, in my opinion. But most importantly, for this ball game, Harris typically will play, say, 35 snaps or so on average. I would say during a game like Alabama, where you expect the starters and the important guys to get, well, their usual load of snaps. I'm curious to see if it'll be more than that, about the same, or less against Alabama. Simply because, well, if you're Missouri, obviously you want to run the ball, but you want balance too. I'm just curious how much Harris is going to be in the game, how much Missouri forces the run game, how much they force Alabama to really bring in maybe extra run personnel, play closer to the line of scrimmage, all of that good stuff. Maybe how much Jordon Harris is actually utilized will tell us this. Or maybe not. They'll just use him about the same as they always do, his usual 35 snaps or so. Either way, I just think there's one reason this game is so interesting to me. I just think there's so many little cat and mouse games on both sides of the ball that I'm just really curious to see how it all plays out. And by the way, speaking of tight ends, I brought up Jordon Harris. Well, Josh Cuevas on the other side for Alabama, sort of similar to Jam Miller, I would say, may not be the biggest NFL prospect in the world. He's not the tallest guy in the world, for example. But I'll just tell you, Josh Cuevas is a tight end I haven't heard many people talking about. I think he's a really good weapon out of the ends for Alabama that really nobody is talking about, because obviously Ryan Williams, Ty Simpson, Jam Miller, those are your headliners on the offense. But Josh Cuevas, another good weapon for Alabama that makes me a little bit worried, because for as much as Missouri and everybody's been talking about the deep passing game, well, Cuevas can maybe feast on the intermediate stuff and stuff near the line of scrimmage if Missouri gets too focused on stopping the big play. And while Missouri's pass protection has not been perfect so far, I would say certainly the run blocking is ahead of the pass protection right now. For Missouri's offensive line, you got to say this. When you compare Missouri and what they did in the transfer portal, how they were able to replace several new offensive linemen, well, they did a heck of a lot better than another notable program that had a lot of offensive linemen to replace as well, and that's the Texas Longhorns. Did you watch Texas against Florida this past weekend? I know everybody likes to focus on Arch Manning, and I understand why. I'm not saying Arch was necessarily great in that ball game, but how many times did Arch Manning just have no chance whatsoever almost immediately as the ball was snapped? Texas's 5 offensive linemen couldn't hold up against Florida's 4-man front. And even though Texas has, I would say, listen, Missouri's done really well in the portal. They've done well in terms of NIL. They've got a solid budget for sure. But you're telling me that they have more resources and more cachet and whatever else than the University of Texas Longhorns have? I'm just bringing this up, not so much to dunk on the Longhorns, though. Why not? Throw me an alley-oop. I'll do it. But I'm bringing it up to just give Eli Drinkwitz, Brandon Jones, the offensive line coach, just tremendous credit, because, hey, if you've got offensive line positions that need to be replaced in an offseason, well, it sounds really easy to just say, hey, get this guy and that guy. They were good at Wake Forest. This guy was good at West Virginia. Come on down and they'll be good here. That isn't necessarily always the case. Not all schemes are created equally. And, quite simply, it's just hard to predict the future, especially when it involves 20 and 21-year-old young men, that type of deal. So once again, tip of the cap to Brandon Jones and Eli Drinkwitz for an offensive line that still seems like it's coming together and hopefully still has its best football to be played in the back half of this season. Boy, what a brutal loss for the Kansas City Chiefs last night. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback fall down on his butt and then get up, especially when he's not exactly Michael Vick either. I know Trevor Lawrence can run a little bit, but anyway, I'm getting off topic here. That play almost broke my brain. But the point here is that there was a couple moments from the NFL this past weekend, including from that Chiefs game last night, that I thought were teachable moments for Missouri fans. So let's talk about that here in a minute. First, though, game time. College football is back, and I love it. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there truly is nothing like it. But getting tickets, well, that can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Well, that's where Gametime comes in. The app has made it just incredibly simple, and I can even see the exact few from my seat before buying. And by the way, if you're not that picky, I frankly love the zone deals. Pick a section, and then Gametime will pick the seats, and you save big money. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. That's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, download Gametime today. And this episode is also brought to you by Square, where your favorite neighborhood spot, well, they run on Square. And there are certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. And, well, without Square, these businesses these days may just go away. People are carrying less and less cash, to be honest with you. So if you don't have the ability as a small business to quickly process payments, well, you're really leaving money on the table. So to me, Square is the way to go. And Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the globe. You can go to square.com/go/LockedOnCollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be glad you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. So not only did the Kansas City Chiefs blow it last night, but their division rival, the Denver Broncos, had a come-from-behind victory that actually got me thinking. You know, when it was 17-16, instead of kicking the extra point, this was with about 7 or 8 minutes left in the game, by the way. Instead of taking the extra point, kicking the extra point to try to tie it, well, instead, Sean Payton and Denver went for 2, and they got it, by the way. Went up 18-17, ended up winning that ball game. And I gotta say, it got me thinking. When it comes to college football, if Missouri were in a similar situation on this Saturday, for example, would you rather do that, or would you rather flip the coin in overtime? Because, and the reason I say flip a coin is, generally speaking, a 2-pointer is about a 50-50 proposition. Of course, depends on the teams, the offenses and the defense and all that good stuff. But for the sake of discussion, let's say that's about a coin flip. Well, I'd say that's overtime is about a coin flip scenario as well, especially the truncated college football overtimes. You get to the third overtime and it becomes a 2-point conversion contest anyway. Well, maybe let's try to go for it right now. And then, by the way, you do it with 7 or 8 minutes left. If you don't get it, well, at least you know what you have to do moving forward here. You need to stop, you need to get the ball back, and hopefully kick another field goal to win it. I'll just say this. I think there's another reason to do this if you're in the NFL that I think actually does apply to college football as well, but especially in a 17-game regular season. But hey, even a college football season where teams can now play as many as 17 games as well. You include 12 games plus a conference championship plus possibly 4 games in the college football playoff. You're the runner-up. You could certainly see that scenario. The runner-up in your conference championship game, I mean, of course. So to me, I'd be asking myself, now, wait a second. Part of my calculus here isn't just, well, do I feel good about getting this 2-pointer or not? It's also, do I like my chances in overtime or not? Do I feel like I have the superior depth? Do I feel like my team is more tired than the other, my first string, my offensive line, whatever it might be? Did I lose an important player in the fourth quarter to injury? Do I like this particular matchup, how it's gone in the last, not only just the entire game, but just as importantly in the last 15 minutes, the last half, whatever it might be? Obviously, none of this is an exact calculation, or this isn't chemistry, let's put it that way. But it is interesting. I think it's an idea, and really, I think I'm kind of on Sean Payton's side here, especially in the regular season. If I feel like I've got a good 2-point play in my back pocket, let's use it right now. Let's not wait until overtime. And by the way, I did think there was one more teachable moment in the Chiefs-Jacksonville game yesterday. I thought Cochran for Kansas City, the young man, 39, I believe was his jersey number, he was flagged for not one but 2 critical holding penalties in the game, one that brought back about a 60-yard kickoff by the Chiefs. The first one I thought it was particularly egregious, and the reason I'm saying this is a teachable moment is I'm sure there are a lot of fans out there, especially if you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, who is saying, hey, great call. Cochran had the guys, he had his jerseys, the sleeves of his jersey were in Cochran's hands, so, well, it's holding, right? He's holding his jersey. By definition, that is a hold. Well, hold on a second. And this is why this is a teachable moment, because this is true in college football as well. And this is something that a decade plus ago I would have complained about too, which is, well, on the perimeter in particular, you'll see receivers, they hold, and by hold, I mean hold the jersey on virtually every single play, to the point where obviously they're taught to do this. But what you cannot do is you can engage and grab the guy's jersey, especially on the outside. What you can't do, you can't flip, you can't turn him and then throw him to the ground, that type of thing. Well, that's what the official saw when, frankly, the defender that Cochran was engaged in, well, he tripped over his own man and made it look like to the official, oh, I guess Cochran threw him to the ground, that type of deal. I'm sorry, I disagreed with that call. I disagreed with the next one that came as well, where it seemed like, again, the Jaguar defender falls down, and that's what the official sees. So I'll say this, if I'm a special teams coach at either level of football, I'm teaching you, if you're the gunner, if you're a defensive back, whatever it might be, if somebody engages with you like that and you can tell that they've grabbed onto your jersey, just fall down and you'll immediately get a 10-yard penalty. At least you will right now until the officials catch on to this kind of nonsense. Now, I have to say, if you want to say that should be a penalty, grabbing onto a guy's jersey, I'm not going to argue with that. I actually agree with you. I get tired of all the jersey grabbing. But I'm just telling you, just information-wise, this is how it's called. You're basically allowed to grab the jerseys on the outside of the play as long as you don't turn the guy, essentially. Is that stupid? Yeah, it kind of is. I'd rather they just wear oven mitts on the offensive line, honestly, but that's just me. Regardless, just wanted to give you a little bit of information here to close out the program. And by the way, speaking of information, you can get lots more information on college football by checking out this Thursday college football kickoff with Drake Toll, Gary Patterson, our bevy of Locked On experts. You can check it out. It's the type of college football preview only Locked On can do. Again, catch college football kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. And I'm John Miller, and thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.